Hi again, everyone. This video is sponsored by contribution from Mia, and here's her story. Ollie, please call me Mia. Thank you for sharing your uncanny insight with others. You have helped countless people without a doubt. I want to contribute to your channel and to share a story with you and hear your opinion on whether this was a case of gaslighting or not. I don't necessarily think that the individuals involved were out to target me specifically. Rather, I believe they were in denial about what was going on and that my reluctance to go along with them and support their attitudes made them inclined to try to make me feel crazy. When 9/11 happened, I was attending graduate school in an area very close to where the attacks occurred. I lived about 10 minutes from one of the attack sites. As was to be expected, everyone on campus was in shock. Many Muslim students walked around campus with American flags pinned or taped to their clothing to signify they were not part of any terrorist group. Everyone was on edge, and it didn't help that anthrax attacks were taking place simultaneously in the same area. A hazmat unit was actually called to my apartment building one time because a resident thought she had seen white powder. At the time, no one knew if the anthrax letters were related to the plane attacks or not, and no one knew if the cells of terrorists were planning more attacks in crowded venues. Despite the horror and the uncertainty, no one seemed to want to talk about the incident. When I attended class in the days after this event, students and faculty would often sit quietly and stare at the floor or into space for short stretches of time. Less than a year before, the country had experienced the whole hanging Chad fiasco that took place in Florida, and it seemed that political tension still existed. Yet no one really discussed it. I did have one professor who mentioned something about leaving the country if George W. won, but she did not and simply said, "Where can we go?" About 2 or 3 days after 9/11, we students were reminded of a big event on campus taking place that evening that would feature speakers who were poets and advocates. The school is large and well known, so such events drew sizable crowds. Just for reference, Stephen King spoke at the school just a few years ago, so we're talking about A-lister poets, advocates, and political figures. I was expected to attend this event. I emailed one of my professors and said that I didn't feel comfortable being in such a huge crowd after what had taken place so soon after. I didn't mention it, but I didn't understand the purpose of the gathering and why the event was so urgent. More urgent than letting officials figure out what exactly had happened before the writing poems and making speeches about it. Let me say that I was not a social justice warrior requesting a safe space from uncomfortable truths. So after after so few post attack, after so few days post attack and being hundreds of miles from my family and hometown, I couldn't imagine being anywhere but in my home with my husband where we could talk about what was on the news and try to make sense of what happened and what it meant to us on a personal level. The last thing I desired was to try to process the situation through some kind of group event when I hadn't yet done that on an individual personal level. Honestly, I wondered why the event had not been postponed for a while, just to let people spend time with their families, process, and try to understand what had happened. Let me say here that I was living in the area just to attend graduate school, and prior to that, had been living in a much smaller suburban area. The professor replied to my email saying that I must feel uncomfortable being so close to ground zero, given that I was not from there, and I should consider seeking a counselor. I cannot remember the exact wording of the email, but her tone suggested that my attitude and reaction were indicative of some kind of psychiatric problem. In other words, I got the impression that the normal, healthy behavior would have been to have no qualms about attending a huge gathering that just might get the attention of terrorists or even copycats, to ignore any fear I might have and just go about my business, to go to Home Depot and buy the recommended plastic sheeting and duct tape that would surely save me if my city were attacked with a biological agent. This email seemed to encapsulate and initiate an attitude that persisted throughout the rest of my time at school. I understand the value of not letting fear incapacitate you, of not letting people who hope to isolate and limit you get their way. At the time, I understood President Bush's urging to the country to carry on as normal, and thought that maybe the school was trying to do that. However, where was the room for expression of totally rational and healthy fear? Where was the time for contemplation, for assessing priorities? I know at least one other student who was told that she was in some way unbalanced and needed to seek counseling because she expressed misgivings about the prevailing culture of the school. The overall impression I got from individuals I knew at the time who were from the area was one of emotional frigidity. Maybe they were scared, and maybe they were just too rational about it for me to see. Regardless, I can't help but think that they wanted to be perceived as residents of a cosmopolitan, progressive city that doesn't have time for anxieties of the rubes who might simply be passing through. I'm not trying to paint all the residents with the same brush, but I am merely describing my experiences with some individuals who called this area home. So, Ollie, what do you think about the concept of institutional gaslighting? Thanks, Mia. Well, that's what, modern day academia, especially the college universities, is. It's an institution of gaslighting. Here's why. We know all 99% of universities are left. Not only left, far left. Have been so for a long time. Have been so for a long time. Okay, and this is another, the media helps out with this as well. Look, being that universities are far left, they are not going to give sympathy or give credence to one of the dogmas of the other side, to give credence that Islam and radical Islam is dangerous. The left in universities has been protecting and covering for terrorism since the 70s, the 60s. It's another victim class in their minds, another oppressed minority. Therefore, they're never going to empathize with you, regardless of what they do. Look at what's going on today. It's the same thing. It's now progressed full on into society where you have a Muslim terrorist claiming allegiance to ISIS, goes in and mows down in, a couple hundred miles away from here in Orlando, a gay nightclub. And they still don't call it out. It's the poison of the left. It's the ideology of the left. It's been going on for years and years and years. Even if you kill them. And this is a point I made in another video. The narcissist would rather die, okay, than to admit you're right. They'll die for their narcissism because that's what'll happen. They won't face the reality that there is a problem in Islam, a big problem with terrorism and the enabling of terrorism. The evidence has been apparent for years and years and years, dating back to the Crusades. The Crusades were that the Christians, and everybody knows I'm not into religion. I'm not some kind of super Catholic or Christian or follow or go to church. But if you follow the actual history, the Christians didn't just decide to go and start fucking people up. It was response to the Muslim Crusades. It was the Muslim conquering, the overthrowing of Constantinople, taking over the largest church and making it into the largest mosque, Damascus. This has been going on for years. The evidence is apparent. But they're blind to it because of an ideology. They're not blind to it. They just won't admit to it. because to admit to it is to admit that they're wrong. And to admit that they're wrong, they'd rather die than do that. So it's an institutional gaslighting that occurs in the universities. And now, from here now, once they graduate and once they get out, it now extends out and fully into society. And through the media, and the media perpetuates this, with these ridiculous protests after the inauguration, like this is something new. This happens every time a Republican wins. They flipped out over Bush as well. Every time a Republican wins, they flip out. The left's been doing this for 60 years. This is nothing new. This is nothing original. I remember the 2004 Republican convention in New York City. It was the same shit. There's nothing new. This is nothing new. This is what they do when they lose. And it's an extension of what you're talking about here, of this entitlement mindset. Now, 9/11 for me personally is because I was in the thick of it. I wasn't there that day. I was in New Jersey. I lived 10 miles from the trade center. I was working for Macy's. At the time, I had just been promoted back to a New Jersey store, and the next day it's like you're back over in the city again. You're back in Herald Square. So, like, for me personally, I didn't have time to be afraid because I had this #1 major landmark to secure, which was, that's why you're there. And it was a different time, and I lived through the anthrax, and I know exactly what you're talking about people finding white powder. There was a lot to be nervous about. Okay? And W did say, carry on with your life. There was a huge push on that from both W and Giuliani. I mean, the Yankees were in the playoffs. We're going to the playoffs again. They ended up in the World Series. They got right back to baseball. They got right back to football. Macy's still threw the Thanksgiving Day parade, and there was talk of canceling it. So there was this push, okay, to just carry on with your life. But the real question is here, and this is how you know what you're saying is real about the gaslighting and how the universities and what was going on is bullshit. Because if it wasn't Muslims who perpetrated 9/11, let's just say it was white Christian Nazi fundamentalists who hate women, and they just flew planes into the World Trade Center and then Planned Parenthood. And do you think the left or the university would have said, okay, just carry on, you're making more of this, it happened X amount of money? Oh, no. That's how you know it's institutionalized gaslighting, because the hypocrisy is obvious and the hypocrisy is blatant. And this is nothing new. So thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your story. I hope this helps. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, or you'd like to set up a Skype chat or have a private video made, you know what to do with the PayPal and the email links in the description box. I'll have the video right back to you. This is Ali Matthews. Thanks for watching. See you all again soon.